Hi there, first graders. It's Mrs. Crawford again with another mini lesson. This mini lesson is a little different than our last one. This one is more about how we think about the story as we're reading it. Your first grade teachers have sent home some stories for you to read, and then they have questions they want you to answer. So I'm hoping that this mini lesson will help you think as you read the story so that when you come back to answer the questions, a lot of those ideas are already there. I'm going to do a couple mini lessons on this idea of thinking while we're reading. What are we thinking about? Are we asking ourselves questions? What information are we getting from the story as we read? These are all important things that readers do as they read. So I have an anchor chart today that I made for us that we're going to look at the end. But our mini lesson today is about when you tell about a story, you're going to tell and think about the who was in the story, where are they at, and what happened. Your characters, your setting, and your plot. This leads you to the main ideas of the story, that what happened, what was going on, the problem, the solution. We'll talk more about those another time. But we're going to focus today on the who, where, and what happened. So I've made a little chart that's not filled out yet, and we're going to talk about a couple of read-alouds that I have done and see if we can remember from listening to those stories who was in them, where were they at, and what were they doing. Now, this is important. If you have not listened to these stories yet on my read-alouds, stop the video now. And there should be a link below the video with the 2 read-alouds that you will need to listen to before doing this mini lesson. So if you have not listened to these stories yet, Pigs Make Me Sneeze, and that is not a good idea. Stop the video now, go listen to those stories, and then come back. All right, so here's the little chart that I've made for us today, and I've titled it with who, the where, and the what happened. And this is not something that you would do. You probably won't write these things down as you're reading. However, these are things that you can be thinking about and asking yourself as you're reading the story. Who was in that story? Where were they going and what happened? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through real fast 2 stories that I've read to you on read-alouds, and we're going to see if we can remember or even reread the who, the where, and the what happened. The first story we're going to look at today is, let me scoot this over, That Is Not a Good Idea by Mo Willems. And we're going to think about this story and who. Let's start with the who. Now, the cover right off the bat reminds me of the who in this story. The fox, the goslings, and the goose. Do you remember that? So as you are reading the story, we are first introduced to the fox and the goose, right? And as the story goes on, Mo adds the characters of the goslings later. So if I was thinking about this story and I was thinking about the who, in that spot right there, I would be thinking, oh, I know who it is. It's the fox and the goose and the goslings. Those are my who is in the story. So my next one, where? Where are these characters in the story? Well, that's an interesting question because as I'm thinking while reading my story, I'm going to notice a change in my where. My setting isn't the same through the whole story. So as I'm reading this story, I notice that when it starts off, Fox and Goose are in town. And then they are leaving town and going for a stroll, if you remember. And they end up going over a bridge. And they end up in the woods. Do you remember this? Yep, there they are. They're in the woods now. And they're walking through the woods when Fox invites Goose to go to his kitchen. Remember that? So those would be our 3 places. Where are the characters at in the story? They're in the town, they're in the woods, and They're in the kitchen. Now we can also think about maybe what time of day it is. That kind of falls under our setting too. It was light out, so we would guess that it's daytime. It might be getting a little bit dark because I noticed that the street lamps are on. So those are some other things that I can be thinking about as I'm reading the story. The last thing that we want to think about is what happened. What's happening in this story? So as I'm reading, I'm asking myself questions. What's happening? What's going to happen? What are the characters doing? So it kind of starts off with Fox kind of luring Goose for a walk. And he lures her into the woods and into his kitchen. But while he's doing that, the little goslings are trying to warn them that it's not a good idea, that they shouldn't be going to these places together. So that's kind of what's happening, what I'm thinking. And maybe I'm wondering, I think maybe I would wonder, why are the goslings warning him or her? I might be making a prediction. Maybe they're worried about their mom because foxes like to eat geese. So maybe the goslings are worried that their mom is going to get eaten, right? These are things that I'm thinking about as I'm reading. I'm starting to notice that maybe Fox, he's going to cook something, and I'm really starting to wonder if the goslings are warning her because he wants to cook her. So these are the things that I'm thinking about what happened in the story. And then, of course, at the very end, we notice that it maybe wasn't what we were thinking, that instead of the fox cooking the goose cooked the fox. And we also learn at the end that the goslings were warning the fox, not the goose. And it looks like maybe they had a nice little fox dinner or fox lunch. So if I was going to add some what happened here, I might say something like, Fox lured Goose into his kitchen. The goose cooked the fox. The goslings had lunch. Those were the things that happened in the story. But you'll notice as I'm reading, my mind is really thinking about who's in the story and where are they going and what is happening and what might happen. Those are predictions. So I'm going to switch to another book that I've already read to you via Read Aloud. Hopefully you've listened, called Pigs Make Me Sneeze. And I picked this book because sometimes when we're reading a story, the who, the where, and the when, what happened, aren't always jumping out at us. They aren't always easily figured out. And that happens in this story. So Pigs Make Me Sneeze, if you remember, the who in our story was Gerald the elephant and Piggy the pig, right? And also there was a character who came in at the end. If you remember when I was reading it, Dr. Cat came along to help. There's Dr. Cat, to help Gerald figure out what is wrong with him because he thinks he's allergic to cats. That kind of goes to the what happened. If you think about the what happened in the story, if you remember, Piggy and Gerald were talking and Gerald kept sneezing over and over and over again. Do you remember that? And he was worried that maybe he was allergic to Piggy and Piggy was his best friend. So do you see the what's happening? Gerald's got the sneezes. He thinks he's allergic to Piggy. But then he goes to the doctor. And Dr. Cat says, No, Gerald, you're not allergic. You have a cold. Do you remember that? So that's kind of the problem and solution, the what happened. And then that brings us to the end, where who gets sick? Poor little Piggy, right? Piggy gets sick because Gerald shared his germs. Now, you might have noticed that I skipped where. And I did that for a reason. Because, stop for a minute. Just take a second to think. Mo Willems wrote this entire story. And my question to you is, where are Gerald and Piggy? Any thoughts or ideas? Tell me now, where do you think they are? Do you think they're inside? Do you think they're outside? There's Dr. Cat. Maybe they're at the doctor's office. So Mo Willems left the where up to us as the reader. We get to decide where this story takes place. I love that. It allows us to use our imagination. It allows us to decide where things are happening, whether it's inside or outside or at the doctor. Maybe you think that they're at Piggy's house. Maybe you think they're at Gerald's house. I don't know. We get to decide the where. So when we think about these stories, and I have my little anchor chart here, I filled in all of those things. Let me turn it here so you can see it better. I filled in those who. That was the gosling and the goose and the fox and the Gerald, Piggy, and Dr. Cat. The where, the things we talked about. Now for here I put, and then I made question marks because we get to decide. We don't know where he's at. And then at the bottom, that what happened. What happened in the beginning, in the middle, and the end? What was the problem? How was it solved? These are all the things we need to think about as we're reading these stories. And then, when you come to that question packet at the end of your story, and you have to answer those questions, if you've been thinking about all of these things and stopping and asking yourself questions and wondering about what's happening, if you've been doing those things while you're reading a story, you'll be able to answer those questions very, very easily. So, if you want to make those questions easier for yourself, take the time to go through the book and read it slowly, thinking as you go and doing all of the things we talked about today. But most importantly, take the time to think about who's in the story, where are they at, and what happened. All right, first grade, so we took a little time to go back into some books that we've already read and think about who was in them and where they were at and what was happening to them. I want you to think about how you can do this as you read a story to yourself, to your family. As a reader, you're doing a lot of things when you read. You're trying to solve tricky words. You're reading words you know fast. But you also have to take the time to think about who's in the story, what are they doing, where are they at. You're going to take time to understand what's happening in the story. I mean, that's what makes the stories enjoyable. Slow down, take your time, and it will make answering those questions at the end of the story so much easier if you're doing these things while you're reading. Now, another way to help you really think about the story and what happened is to tell somebody about it. As soon as you're finished reading a story to yourself, find somebody who might have a second to just listen to you say, "Hey, I want to tell you about the story I just read." Because when you do that, it really helps your mind hold on to that information that you just learned. And then when you go back to answer those questions, it'll be there waiting for you. So I am going to continue with these mini lessons, and we're going to think about some more ways that readers think while they're reading that will help you to answer questions after you're done reading, that will help you think about what's happening in the story, that will help you think about what maybe connections you can make outside of the story, and we'll even think about what might happen or what could have happened if the story hadn't gone the way it is. So I look forward to more mini lessons with you about thinking about the story, and continue reading and continue working on those tricky words, but don't forget to think about the story and enjoy that story. Most important part of a reader. You gotta enjoy what you're reading, okay? So I'll be back soon. I hope you enjoyed this mini lesson, and I hope you take a little bit of time to really think about that story as you're reading. And I really hope that this helps you when you're working in your packet to answer some of those questions that you have at the end of each story.